This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. More details have come to light about a secret compound used by Chicago police for incommunicado interrogations and detentions. The Guardian first reported on the Homan Square facility earlier this year. Some have described it as the domestic equivalent of a CIA black site overseas. Now the Guardian has obtained exclusive video from inside the site. The footage shows a Chicago man named Angel Perez being taken inside a, quote, prisoner entrance. In 2012, Chicago police sought to compel the 33-year-old Perez to cooperate with the drug sting. After agreeing to meet with police officers, Perez was handcuffed and taken to Homan Square. What happened next may be disturbing to many in our audience. Angel Perez says police handcuffed his right wrist to a metal bar behind a bench in an interrogation room. Two officers stood behind him and reportedly threatened to send him to the infamously violent Cook County Jail if he didn't cooperate. Then, Perez says, one of the officers proceeded to sexually assault him with a metal object believed to be a handgun barrel.
He's saying that, you know, when you're in jail and you get penetrated by an African-American, that it feels just like a gun going up your rear end. While he's doing all this, he ends up pulling down my pants, and he gets near my my rear end, I guess you can say, and that's when I just felt something cold and hard just, I guess, penetrate me. And that's when I just jerked and I freaked out and I just went into a full panic attack. I couldn't even talk.
Angel Perez went on to describe what happened.
They shackled my legs and they handcuffed me to the bar and the bench that was there. When this happened, I was already pretty shaken up. My eyes were watering. He kind of pushed me over the metal pile and pushed his hands into my eyes while he was sitting on me. And he's like, you know, you better learn to cooperate. They were playing tug of war with me too, and they were kind of throwing fake punches at me, so I would hit myself. Like, you know, when I flinched, I would hit the back of my head.
Angel Perez says the officers also threatened to go after his family members, including his father, who's battling cancer. Angel Perez is now the 13th person to describe his detainment at the secret police site in Chicago to The Guardian. Like many prisoners, he apparently was never formally arrested, so he was neither booked nor permitted access to an attorney nor charged. Now Angel Perez and 4 others have filed a lawsuit against the Chicago Police Department seeking justice from the city. For more on Homan Square, we're joined now by Spencer Ackerman, national security editor at The Guardian, where he's published a new article on police abuse in Chicago called Homan Square Detainee, I Was Sexually Abused by Police at Chicago Black Site. We'll link to that at democracynow.org. Spencer Ackerman, welcome to Democracy Now! So tell us more about Angel Perez.
So this all happened allegedly, and let's say allegedly up front. These are allegations from Angel Perez, so we're not, you know, consistently using that word throughout and interrupting what the story is. On October 21st, 2012, police who had already contacted Perez the day before sought to have him help them buy drugs in a controlled operation for a dealer that they believed Perez knew, who they had been monitoring. He went under his own free will to an agreed-upon meeting place, thinking that they would just basically have a quick conversation. They had asked him to get there to make sure, in their words, according to Perez, that his car wasn't impounded. When he goes there, his surveillance camera footage from outside that lot that we've obtained and published shows he extends his hand to the officers. He tries to go for a handshake. They turn him around on the car, they handcuff him, and they take him to Homan Square. The video footage that we've published is, if not the first, extremely rare footage from inside the facility that appear to show a more routinized detention operations apparatus than the Chicago police have said publicly in response to our reporting. From there, when Perez demonstrates his reluctance to cooperate, he's afraid, he doesn't really want to be wrapped up in all of this, he's worried about retaliation, the police start escalating things. According to Perez, they're talking a lot about retaliation, not just against him, but against his family, ways that they'll plant evidence, not just on him, but on his family. they start getting, according to Perez, violent. One officer sits on his chest, starts pressing his palms into Perez's eyes. He describes himself as experiencing this kind of aggression for the first time in his life. He's freaked out. He's panicking. They bend him over what he describes as metal detritus in the room near where he's handcuffed, and they pull down his pants. They use a metal object. He says he feels the coldness and the metallic aspect of it as they start tracing it down his back and saying some really vulgar and very racist things in his telling about what's going to happen to him when African-American inmates at a jail in Cook County get a hold of him. They start saying that, if you'll excuse the language, that he's going to feel really like a sexy bitch. So they're really using a lot of sexualized and homophobic insults at him as they're doing this, again, according to Perez, at which point one of the officers allegedly uses this metal object to rectally penetrate him. He says it happens very quickly, and afterwards he immediately agreed to do whatever the police wanted him to do, in this case, make a controlled buy of $170 worth of heroin. That is one of the most shocking aspects, I think, of this case, that all of this happened not just for a man who police were not looking at, who they never charged, who wasn't implicated in the crime itself, and that would be no excuse, of course, even if he was, but nevertheless, as a peripheral figure here, in order to compel him to make a $170 controlled purchase of heroin.
The officer, he said to him, as he did that, "I almost blew your brains out."
That's right. Leading Angel Perez to think that the object used to penetrate him was the barrel of a service revolver, of a gun.
So what is Angel Perez doing right now? He actually had filed a suit and now is refiled?
So in 2013, Perez filed his lawsuit initially, making the claim of the sexual abuse. What he didn't know at that point, and would only come out later, was that all of this happened at Homan Square, the warehouse on Chicago's west side, home to Chicago narcotics units and some tactical units.
He didn't know because he just didn't know its name? He
didn't know because he was, in his telling, jostled in the car where he was going. He couldn't really see. The cops were doing a kind of wild ride. It sounded in some cases, because he wasn't shackled in, although it wasn't a van, somewhat similar to the rough rides we've now heard about with Freddie Gray in Baltimore and other places. He wasn't hurt during that ride, nevertheless. He had also been taken to an actual police station nearby Homan Square at Harrison and Kedzie. So initially, he just assumed he was back there. But they take him to this warehouse. They go through a kind of warren of different rooms until he's taken to the second floor at Homan, and this happened to him.
And again, for people who are just hearing about this for the first time, it has become a big issue since The Guardian started exposing it, even before the re-election of Rahm Emanuel. Homan Square is?
Homan Square is a warehouse complex on Chicago's west side. It's a secretive, but as the Chicago police will like to point out ad nauseum, not secret complex where a lot of plainclothes operations happen. The vice squad is out of there. The narcotics unit is out of there. And it's a place where we now have accounts from 17 people, 13 of whom I have personally interviewed, who between 2005 and 2015 have been taken there, held incommunicado, meaning there's no contemporaneously available to the public record of their whereabouts. No one knows where they are, in other words. Hours shackled with no access to legal counsel, often while police try and pressure them in order to either become informants, provide them with drugs, and increasingly from the stories that we've accumulated, provide them with guns.
I want to go to two other men who are now suing the city of Chicago after being detained at Homan Square. This is Jose Garcia.
Took us in the building, and when you hear them say, dead man walking, and you hear doors closing, I mean, your hair just stand up, you know. I mean, what are you going to do? You know, you're thinking you're going to get beat up, you know, so, you know, we were just scared.
Another plaintiff, John Vergara, describes the conditions of his confinement at Homan Square.
It kind of looks like a cage for a dog. It's just a bench with a bar on the wall, no toilet, no sink, no nothing.
So talk more about this, Spencer Ackerman.
So John and Juan have described in their case being at a sandwich shop in Chicago a couple years ago when masked police busted in, and arrested both customers there, arrested kitchen staff there, took them to Homan Square, tried to, again, shake them down as they're all shackled, some of them shackled to each other and then shackled to a bar in this sort of cage-like holding area in order to see about a narcotics arrest. In the case of John Vergara and Jose Garcia, John Vergara starts saying to the officers that he knows a civil rights attorney and he's going to contact that attorney and let people know what's happening inside Homan Square. The cops made a deal with him to say, we will let you out. This is after several hours of being detained and not being able to access, being denied phone calls, not being able to call their families, not being able to call their lawyers, anyone. And then ultimately the cops make a deal with him and they say, if you don't tell this lawyer or anyone else, we'll let you go right now. And that's ultimately what happened.
And as one of them says, dead man walking, they say?
A lot of intimidation moves by police to make people feel like they're entirely under the control of their police captors.
And lest anyone think we're talking about decades ago, though that is extremely significant today, can you tell us the story of Calvin Coffey that happened a couple months ago?
So just in February, basically less than 3 weeks before we published our first story from inside Homan Square, according to the lawsuit that he joined, which Angel Perez recently refiled, he was picked up for narcotics or for some sort of, it's unclear, drugs delivery issue. But he's just picked up off the street. He's taken to Homan Square. He's confined for a long period of time without a bathroom break. He ultimately, while he's held there for a long period of time, has to answer a call of nature, defecates on the floor of where he's shackled. Police allegedly make him clean up his own feces with his skull cap.
I want to turn to Victoria Suter, who traveled to Chicago on May 12, 2012, to attend the big anti-NATO protest. On May 16th, she and 11 others were taken to Homan Square in Chicago after police raided the apartment where they were staying. Suter spent 18 hours in solitary confinement before being allowed to speak to a lawyer. Earlier this year, she described her experience on Democracy Now!
When we arrived there, it was dark. I couldn't see the outside of the building, but we went in through a garage. There were really large, like military vehicles. They were black, just absolutely massive. There was one of the other people arrested in that raid with me. They took him in first and left me outside with another officer, and then they took me inside. I was taken to a room, not particularly big, no windows. They put ankle shackles on me at that point and cuffed my right arm to a bar that ran behind the bench. Where I stayed for 18 hours prior to being able to see an attorney.
Victoria Suter also said an officer told her, quote, "We're going to give you a tour of hell on Homan." You can see the whole interview at democracynow.org. Finally, Spencer.
With Angel Perez, there's a legacy here of not just police abuse, but sexualized police abuse in Chicago. Darrell Cannon, a man who in 1983 was coerced into falsely confessing for a murder that would have landed him on death row and would have had him be executed if Illinois' Governor George Ryan hadn't cleared out death row, had a gun, a shotgun barrel shoved in his mouth. It was empty, but police pulled the trigger 3 times. That got him to falsely confess to a murder. It sounded very reminiscent to me of what Angel Perez went through, again, allegedly, in 2012. So over basically 3 decades later.
And in just a minute, we're going to have Darrell Cannon join us live from Chicago. Finally, the Chicago police continuing to insist they do not use violence with interrogations, though they've admitted Homan Square exists.
They've admitted Homan Square exists. They continue their nonspecific denials, and now at this point, they don't even respond to my questions when I ask them. They don't even acknowledge receipt of my emails. But in a supposed fact sheet that they put out on March 1st to attempt to refute some of my reporting, they took great umbrage at the suggestion that anyone would be physically abused. They acted as if that that has never happened in Chicago, that there's no history there, there's no legacy there.
Well, we're going to talk about a multi-million-dollar fund that the mayor and others have set up to deal with police torture in Chicago. Spencer Ackerman, thanks so much for being with us, national security editor at The Guardian, where he's published a new article on police abuse in Chicago called Homan Square Detainee was sexually abused by police at Chicago Black Site. We'll link to that at democracynow.org. We'll be back in Chicago in a moment.